All right, thank you guys all for coming. We got a fun panel today. I'm actually going to let them introduce themselves because they know themselves better than I ever would. So we're going to start on my side right here. Just go ahead and kind of your name and just a little bio of what you're doing and why you're here.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Dr. Zachary Dunbar. I am an assistant professor over next door at LECOM. I teach the first year medical curriculum. I did my PhD at UB about 5 years ago now in oncology, that's cancer sciences. I dabbled in a lot of different stuff that hopefully can be interesting and informative to you today. I did surveillance work on COVID. I did environmental exposure tracking. I've done water testing, just environmental quality and control. I lecture about this stuff at LECOM all the time. But I'm really glad that you decided to come today, and I'm excited to hear from you and share some insights.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay, I'm Dr. Ping Zheng. To some of you, you already know me then. Okay, so very happy to see you here. So I'm an associate professor of psychology at Elmira College. So I have been teaching here for about 9 years, 9 to 10 years. So I earned my medical degree in neurology in China. So then I earned a PhD at the University of Wyoming. I'm a clinical psychologist. So I have been teaching abnormal psychology, introduction to clinical psychology, personality, and other courses, happiness, right? Here. So my research interests are primarily focused on post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety disorder related. So I'm happy to join the discussion today. So we're going to share some information and engage in the discussion. Thank you very much.
Awesome, thank you.
Well, it's great to be here today. My name is Ashley Wilson. So I have a diverse, eclectic background. I have a background in helping a lot of youth and women that have been through really troubled backgrounds. Some of that being trafficking issues. So I've worked with teens that have been trafficked and also women that have been trafficked, and used to have a nonprofit that helped survivors of human trafficking. So I did a lot of that advocacy work for over a decade. And then I also have 4 small businesses. One is I like to say is my art therapy. So a lot of arts and crafts and beading and all of that. And then I also have a holistic one called AMW Wellness, where I help people to get to the root of their issue through alternative methods and holistic practices. And then I also have a pop-up thrift shop. It's called Worthy Wear 8. So you might see me at the table later on. And then I have Freed Communities, which is, I would like to say, my spinoff from when I had my nonprofit. And it's an LLC that helps people concerning trauma recovery, organizational development, and economic empowerment. So it's great to be here today.
Very cool. And last but not least.
Morning, my name is John Rittenberger. So I'm the Chief Medical Officer for the Pennsylvania Hospitals of Guthrie. I'm clinically an emergency physician, so I get to see some of the climactic disasters as they arrive in the hospital. And then I guess my research interest is more in resuscitation science. So people who receive CPR, try to get their heart started, how do we get them to recover and actually be able to return home, which is very different than what we're going to discuss today. So you won't have to get into that part of my interest.
We might need
that.
Very cool. Well, it's very nice to meet you all. Thank you guys so much. So this is basically just ask questions and they'll answer them. So after you kind of hearing what they do and what they're interested in, does anybody have any questions that they want to ask? And there could be interesting discussion. If not, I'll start calling on people, and nobody wants that. Yeah, go ahead.
I would ask everyone on the panel, what impact has climate had on the populations that you work with?
So whoever wants to start with that, can kind of just go around.
I was going to share that we're talking about the population previously that I was working heavily with. When you have any type of disaster or anything that has displacement, that puts you more at risk for any other possible abuse or possible exploitation. And so being able to have some type of resource, say if you're another resource in the area to be able to direct people to housing and to services. Having a directory of some sorts would be so helpful when certain situations are coming up in that particular manner, because for the population that I worked with a lot, housing was a big issue.
Does anyone else have anything they want to add?
So when we talk about like which population could be impacted most, so we were thinking about the vulnerability. So there will be a vulnerable populations, for example, with people who are like women who are pregnant, so they're worried about how the environment affect the fetus, and for people who lack of enough resources, like the poor community, so they have limited choices to like manage the life. So when they experience something. Yeah, so regarding the clinical population, we would say many people have taken abnormal psychology and DSM, and so people who once they start, so receive the diagnosis, one DSM disorder, so it's likely they're gonna receive another one. So although, so let's say the anxiety related, so the climate change related anxiety is not listed in DSM. However, we know like when people experience that, so they will still like impact the life, so when people, we say some people tend to internalize the situation, so when this is what happens, what should I do? So I don't know how to, so seek help from outside. So I'm just trying to think about it, what should I do? And so those population we consider that's a kind of vulnerable population, so could be impacted most. So that's one. Thank you.
I think to piggyback off that, when you're talking about identifying a vulnerable population or a population that's at risk of something, and we're trying to place that in the context of climate change and climate disaster, those populations and the people that fit those definitions of being at risk are going to widen. There's going to be more and more people that are in the high risk category.
Right.
To use an example that piggybacks off of that, firefighters in California. There's a lot of socio kind of demographic information that we can do, and I encourage you to look up some of the stuff that is out there on firefighters and who end up kind of getting compelled into, for lack of better resources, finding this role as a firefighter. Now you're getting into how we map that against chronic disease. Now you have smoke inhalation. Now you have trees falling on you. Now you have these elements. That's in California. And in terms of how climate more broadly affects like the work I do on the population health side of things, I did a lot of work with COVID during the pandemic and beyond. And there's a lot of really fascinating carryovers with like the expansion of zoonotic disease. So, I mean, one proposed mechanism by which COVID happened in the first place is bats being closer to humans, period. Why are the bats there? Because of deforestation, because the bats need somewhere to go, so they go closer to humans. To use a more kind of pressing analog, I'm sure you guys have seen some stuff about bird flu. Those birds are closer to us now. And there's kind of two sides to that. One is, birds are closer to us because they have less habitat. That leads to things like in the news, the geese in, I think, Geneva that had avian flu. Those geese have to go somewhere, so they come to the park in Geneva. And then, on the psychological side of things, there's also the assessment of assessing socio-demographic information. Now you have farm workers that are working with birds, and they're in those closed pressed and, very built up spaces, and now you have another etiology for disease. So as someone that's kind of a dork like me that likes to track etiology of disease, you have all these different modalities where climate shifting is putting people in populations that they might not otherwise be, and expanding the definition of what a high risk person is. And both of those things are going to make a lot of the progression of these things a lot worse.
Very cool. You have anything you want to add?
So I guess one thing I should preface is I am here as a private citizen, so I don't necessarily represent the actual views of the Guthrie Clinic or any of my employers. Not to sound like I'm from the U.S. Military, but I should give you that caveat to start. But I would note on a day-to-day basis for patients, this affects them greatly. So when we think about, a heat wave moving through the region, there's, two populations that are at high risk. You've got the elderly who are at high risk, and you've got children at high risk. Children are at high risk because they have a different body surface area. Their ability to dissipate heat is a little bit different than adults. So you can see a kid with heat stroke presenting to the hospital. By a different token, elderly, they tend to have medical conditions, right? They have high blood pressure, emphysema, trouble sleeping. Maybe they can't afford to pay for the electricity to, air condition their house. And so they're on medications that make them prone to get hot and potentially have heat stroke, but also, have their COPD worsen or their asthma worsen. When we had those lovely fires in Canada about 2 years ago, and it was nice and dark all the time here, and they said don't go out and run, people were wearing masks outside. Our bounce back rate for patients with COPD went from 16%, which is where it normally is, to 60. That's a massive change for these folks. Bearing in mind they're old, they're already on oxygen, they're on a bunch of different medications. And if they go outside to hit Tops or Wegmans just to get some stuff, they, run the risk of having, a hospitalization from it. So this is a very real, dangerous thing for these folks.
All right. Anyone else have anything they want to add, like going off top of that, or just a new question altogether? It doesn't really matter. Yeah.
This could be, I could be missing the message of the way. For climate change, does climate change actually impact seasonal depression? Does it worsen seasonal depression? Does it amplify the effects of that?
Can I take that question? Okay, so because when we talk about the season, first that's a very good question. So so previously we mentioned like when one person received a diagnosis of DSM, so the first one, so it's likely so they're gonna receive another one. So when we're saying that is like some people took the course as a personality, and that people are different. So the people's reaction, so in responding to the environment would be a little bit different then. So we said some people, for whatever reason, so when we say integrative approach to analyze why, so what causes that? So that would be like outside the reason, so there'll be internal reasons. Yeah, some people tend to be vulnerable to develop depression, anxiety. So when people experience seasonal, like a depression disorder, so it is likely, so they're gonna develop another, we say maladaptive behavior or severe anxiety when responding to another situation, like a stressor from the environment. Yeah, so that's possible. So I learned some data from American Psychological Association and American Psychiatric Association, because they did poll every month, like starting like a long time ago. So just recently, they found people's concern, worrying about the influences from the climate change increased about, so more than 50% people who develop a certain level, so anxiety, depression, related to climate change. So among those population, so people who experience other disorders, so primarily contributed to that population. So.
Very cool. We have about 3 minutes left for this question. If anyone else wants to add anything, or we can move on.
One of the things that's really cool with, well, it's not cool, but seasonal,
Cool.
I think it's cool. Seasonal depression. There is plenty of data out there that shows that it can be a vitamin D deficiency. And so just anecdotally and biochemically, vitamin D starts as a molecule called calcitriol or cholecalciferol, which is in your skin. And it turns out that you need a set amount of sunlight to induce the reaction to make vitamin D. It's just it's a photo product. It's a thing that gets converted by sunlight, a photo product. And so, you're not going outside as much in the winter. That's one element. And so, okay, you're not going outside because it's cold. What is the role of climate change in affecting this, and how does it correlate with SAD, right? So there's kind of two factors, and it relates to the UV beaming on yourself, on your skin. The first is the location of the sun, which, seasonally changes, but geographically hasn't changed in thousands of years, pretty much, right? So the other element is what is between space and you as a person, all the atmosphere. So if you have higher incidence of smoke, if you have issues with the ozone layer, now you're filtering out the beneficial fields of the UV radiation that can induce that change. And I would say it's a mild driver of an increased incident in SAD. So that's part of how, biochemically some of these things can relate back to the environment too.
So it's like interaction between human and environment.
Yeah.
So that would contribute to the consequence.
Very cool. All right, anyone else have another question for maybe a specific panelist?
There's a hand right there.
Yeah, so I was wondering specifically for you on our, I guess to your right, my left. Because you work in healthcare, how do you think that healthcare processes will continue to change as we kind of keep furthering the climate change crisis that's happening? Because I know you said that with the fires in Canada about 2 years ago, the rates of improvement went from 16 to about 60%. And I was just wondering how you think that will continue to change as the climate crisis either worsens or if you can start to improve that.
So we'll continue to see significant swings in what presents to our doors and what we need to address. Some of that is seasonal variability, as you discussed, right? So, right now is hip fracture season because there's a ton of ice, you may have noticed, if you get off campus. And so, like when I talk to the trauma team, they're like, yes, we have 18 people who are over 65 who have hip fractures because they fell and tried to take care of the dog. Then it'll be proper trauma season after May when people go out and, ride their motorcycles and smash into things. And then, maybe we'll have a little wildfire somewhere that, makes COPD really terrible. And then, maybe there'll be some new horrendous zoonotic disease that shows up. So I think to answer your question, one of the really interesting things about healthcare is you really have to flex and move. And so while we glorify a lot of I am the world's expert on whatever, we as a healthcare industry have really honed in on that over 50 years. But really what we need to do now is we are going to have to be more resilient and more generalist and be able to flex. And okay, here's my nerd who can take care of that, but I need to create an entire structure that allows us to move with whatever disease process happens today. Traditionally, things have happened in what they call silos, right? So like this is the eye and ear expert, here's the heart expert. But nowadays, those are breaking down and we really need to be able to flex as a group. You're an expert in this, but as we talk about places where the flood comes, wipes out people's homes, undomiciled. How do we take care of those folks when they're undomiciled and they're hanging out in standing water? There's all sorts of wonderful bacteria you can get. You land in my emergency department, maybe we admit you, but where do you go after that? Right. It'll take 6 months to rebuild your house. I can send you to the Red Roof Inn or whatever, but that's not a long-term solution. So how do we plug in, with our folks and our community resources to take care of this? Now that their house is gone and their job's gone. Oh gosh, how do we, get them a job? Which could play into I'm depressed because now one of my, senses of my import. Now my job and my house are gone. That's acutely stressful. So it's a really complicated milieu.
Right.
Yes. Very cool. Thank you. Sorry, I forgot your name. What's your name?
Ashley.
Ashley?
Yes.
Does anyone have a question for Ashley? It's been a second since she's been able to talk. Yeah, go ahead.
You said stuff about art therapy and stuff, and I'm interested in doing that in the future. So
Yeah.
how could that help individuals who are gaining the effects of climate change and all the, I don't know.
No, it's a great question. Yeah, I look at it as another level of trauma, right? Anytime you have a situation like that where you're displaced or, something that was very meaningful to you is now affected. You think about things that happen in LA, right? You have something one day and then the next day it's gone. At some point, you'll have to deal with that to to move forward in your journey in life, overcoming whatever you've gone through. So in the process of what you would feel is a chaotic situation, as they're getting their housing, as they're getting jobs, then you come in to kind of help alleviate some of the stress and the other mindset issues that are going on through art therapy. Or you'll see people just say, hey, come to this area, just come get food, just come meet with people, just come do some art. And, you know, in the midst of a chaotic situation or a crisis, you may think, why is that needed? It's to help you get through the hump of the next thing, because as we talked about, this could be a long process. And working with complex trauma over the years that I have with, you know, women and people who have come through some really tough situations, they need that just as much as they need the jobs, just as much as they need the housing. They need a safe space that they can have another outlet to release their trauma. Did that help in answering?
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for another specific person or an overall idea you may want to hear a couple minutes on? Yeah, go ahead.
So kind of piggybacking on her idea or her point that some things in healthcare might change depending on the season. I actually my mother used to work with Guthrie as well, handling primarily oxygen tanks. I know that was like a big part of her thing. Do you think that stuff that certain products and stuff like that, like oxygen tanks, will also increase in prevalency as climate change increases due to stuff like trees burning down?
So certainly possible that we're going to see folks with more, lung disease that are oxygen dependent. I would note our, population, we had a little drop off obviously during COVID, but, lifetime survival is starting to increase again. And so, if you live long enough, something is going to happen. Some organ's going to have dysfunction. Lungs are, a perfectly good one. I take some solace in that there are less smokers, which is a big, highly associated with development of lung disease. So if you have that habit, please chat with your healthcare professional to stop. And if you don't, please don't pick it up. But those things can all, yes, it's certainly possible. My crystal ball is about good for 3 hours. And I can't tell you what's going to happen beyond that, but yes, it's at risk.
Anyone else want to say on that topic? Okay. Anyone else have another question? Maybe a new topic that we haven't got to explore yet? What's your name in the back with the meme? Yeah, Sophia?
Yeah.
Do you have any questions pertaining to climate change or mental health or the two together that we could talk about?
Sure, I mean, actually for Ashley, I think I might have had a question. The holistic practices that you talked about, how does that affect people with climate change, like issues like displacement and stuff? Like, how do you kind of use that to help people with that kind of issue?
The holistic practices, how do you help them? So I think going back to what I shared before, is like, I'm looking at the aftermath. So how do we come in as the people that can help long term? I like looking at the preventative ways of doing things as well, but typically in the work, I've come into the after part of it. So being able to process their situation or their trauma and ask them what they need. I think we have to be careful in these different crises that we don't become like their savior in the fact of like saying what they need without asking each person what they need for their specific situation. And I've heard that, especially in working even internationally, you got to be careful with the whole charity thing. Everybody doesn't want you to give them everything. Sometimes it's just the initial part. So you help in the initial part, and then you bring the people in that are within that county or within that country or within that area to say, now as this is your space, how would you like this to be redeveloped? How would you like for services and whatnot to help your set of people or your set of society or whatever the case may be? So I would say that's the biggest part that I've learned over the time of working with a lot of complex situations, that I don't come in as the savior, that I ask, where do you actually need the help, and assist in that way.
Very cool.
I'm Dr. Dunbar. Zach.
Does anyone have any questions for Dr. Dunbar, specifically on, is there anything you want to talk about?
I'm good with whatever you
Anyone
do.
have any questions for- Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, you said that your specialty was in cancer research. How do you think that cancer research, or I guess just cancer prevalence in general, will be affected by the climate crisis? And also, like, if anyone else wants to give their input, how mental health services work with cancer, because that's really what's very taxing on individuals as well and motivating.
Yeah, so my background was actually in e-cigarettes, so smoking like fired something up there. So yes, incidence rates of that are down, which is good, but you know, vaping is now a new problem. So what's going to happen with that? That's a totally different subject. Anyway, in part of that workup, we spent a lot of time on cancer survivorship, and there's a lot of, I think people carry a lot of guilt when they're I mean, it's a traumatic thing to be diagnosed with cancer. And to relate that back to like the environment, the way you see that manifest in cancer and just in society more broadly is like this feeling of like, I deserve compensation or someone has to pay, because they either internalize it on themselves as cancer survivors and they say like, I'm wrong, I did something bad. You know, a lot of smokers do have some internalized guilt like that. But if it's an environmental exposure, mesothelioma, if we want to stay in the realm of lung cancer, there's this entire ecosystem around, you may deserve compensation, call 1-800-888 bad guy lawyers, we will sue somebody for you, you know, and that's part of like the psychological response that I think is kind of a normal psychological response to it. So as like with most things, you know, I wish we could give a hard answer of the etiology of this disease will go up by 15%. We can't really say that. What I can say is you will see an evolution in trends of cancer that will likely go up. Your melanomas are likely to go up. Different tertiary exposures like your breast cancers, your prostate cancers, elements like that that are very environmentally driven, I'll put it that way, where there's always a new point source of environmental exposure. They're happening all the time. There's always new heavy metals. PFAS is one, it's a firefighting foam. And it was ubiquitous on military bases and training facilities, and firefighting facilities. It seeps into the water. Now you have a whole new chemical analog. There's always new chemicals. There's always new health behaviors associated with those chemicals. And it's writ large on how we adapt to all of these things within the guise of environmental health. So I hope that's kind of a wishy-washy answer, but I think it relates back, and I'll pitch to you for survivorship and how you deal and recover from that.
Survivorship. So when we're talking about, so that's just one example then. So if we categorize that, we would say, the case we just talked about, so belongs to, we say the life-threatening disease, because cancer is considered, we don't have effective cure, or we say, so normal people don't have access to effective cure because of money, because they're very expensive treatment, so they are more effective. However, just not everyone has the access for it. So that's why we say, yeah, so when people experience that, when we're talking about survival, I think the treatment, because currently we don't have the specific, we say, so like echo anxiety listed in DSM. So we don't have a systematic treatment for that, but we do have some suggestions for that. So when we understand climate, so the C represent, we will consider climate change. And so if we consider that crisis, that may cause anxiety. So anyone who could experience that, especially for people who are vulnerable, yeah, who already suffer certain disease affected by the environment. So like L, we would say they represent learn on a supported group. So learn from like a family member, friends, learn on like a religious belief. Yeah, some people will rely whatever, so they feel useful. So I represent, we said, it's okay to feel what you are feeling. So you're not alone because you're not the only one who experienced that situation. So many people would consider, yeah, so I'm actually sensing that, I'm actually feeling that, just like what you were talking about, normalizing. normalizing? Yeah. So like A, we would say represent like action or solution. Yeah, activate for action and solution. Yeah, so M represent because many people want to learn about the information like search from social media to, because we are worried. So we search for information about that. So the more information we're exposed to that, so there will be more worries. So that could happen. So that's why we say manage your social media exposure. Yeah, so that's a part. And we say T represent talk to someone. So you trust, talk to friends, family, and talk to a therapist, talk to a professional helper. And yeah, so also we would say, so you take a deep breath and take a walk. So those would help. And E, we would say embrace hope. So this is not the end of the world. So we embrace hope and validate positive emotions. So that's what we can do for survival.
If I could just.
Yeah.
Talking about the solution part, I know talking about big issues like this, sometimes can get overwhelming in the sense of like, okay, what do I do next, right? Like there's all of these sectors that we're coming from. In your place, what do you do next? So I just wanted just to offer some resources to you guys just to say, well, the next step. So a good YouTube channel that kind of covers climate justice, if you want to say, is called DW Planet A. That's a pretty good YouTube channel if anyone wanted to go to that. And also there's a organization called Dresscember, and they look at fashion and how that has an impact on climate or human trafficking or exploitation or whatnot. And they have a blog section and it's called Ethical Fashion. And so you can find out there as far as, okay, how are the purchases that you're making affecting climate change, whether you're clothing or whatnot. And so those were just a few things that came to mind. They have a section actually there, I just saw it today, for college students to know what next steps to take in that particular area. So just wanted to offer some solutions and next steps.
Very cool. We're gonna move on to the next question. Does anyone have anything that they want to ask? Yeah, go ahead.
So we talked a lot about the physical impacts of the climate. When it comes to displaced individuals, have you been noticing how they're dealing with it? Are they even seeking healthcare? Are they going into medical debt? Kind of what's the situation?
So I guess from the perspective of seeking care, yes, eventually if it gets bad enough and you get worried enough, you're going to seek out medical care. That's kind of a common theme. You bring up a really important point though, right? If you are displaced or you don't have insurance, you are unlikely to have a relationship with a primary care doctor who helps with the prevention part. Ben Franklin would say, an ounce of prevention is pound of cure, right? And many people don't do that. And so they present decompensated to an emergency department because that's a 24/7 healthcare option, right? So when I got into emergency medicine, there was an old TV show called ER. Now it's called PIT, right? The PIT. And it put all these cool, sexy things that were going on and you were saving people's lives, et cetera. That happens a little bit, but a lot of it is actually acute unscheduled care. Because that's the safety net. And that is the only place that is required by federal law to see anybody, regardless of your ability to pay, regardless of the time, regardless of the hour. So that is a really critical safety net that was, created in the 1980s and 1990s. So yes, we see people with more decompensated disease arriving.
Very cool. Do you have anything to add?
I was just gonna say, then you have the transfer from that, well, like we would get calls then from the hospital. And so then just even simple things, like if you're able to donate to certain nonprofits or places that help displaced people, give them gift cards, gas cards, different things like that, so they can even get to the hospital. Those are just little things that you may not think about, but those are the things they need. Grocery shopping gift cards, all of those different things are what they need now when they get to the next place.
Very cool. Some of the guys that just walked in, do you guys have a question based off of climate change and emotional health? Maybe someone on this panel can answer for you. Perfect. So anybody have any questions based off of that same idea? Anything we've talked about? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I can follow up with you, Ashley, if you don't mind. You were talking about, I mean, okay, I just kind of want you to go more in depth on the concept of what we can do for them. Because, I mean, like, with the flooding that's been happening in parts of the South, it's something that we up here, especially in Elmira, New York, will never experience. There's not really a whole lot of flooding that will
Right.
ever happen around here.
Yeah.
So I was saying give them gift cards so they can get to the hospital.
Yes.
And I know that you do a lot of work with, you do a lot more work with people,
Mhm.
in recovery rather than like addressing their health concerns. And so I was just wondering if you could do just like a little bit of like what we can do with that.
Yeah. So I know as far as managing social media, what was talked, but I happen to love social media. I think it could be a great tool for when you use it the right way. And I think being able to connect and see what are the places that you would say is credible that are saying these are now the places that we're going to put a list for, and these are good spots to donate to and to connect with and all of that, that can then help those people. So there was like, I think it was in LA, there was a particular organization that was saying, from this time to this time, we can take donations and we're gonna get it to the people. So they had like an Amazon, gift list or something like that. And so those of us that are not there personally, we can buy what's on the gift list. It will get to the people who are organizing everything, that will get to the people that are in need. So you almost become the part that can help funnel it through. That makes sense. So find a credible source, connect in a way that makes sense, that will actually get to the people that are going to help those that are in need. And you can follow through on that. You can even ask them too, like, is there a way that we can know that those people were helped? Like, can I be on an email list? Is there some other updates, text messages, something? So I know that the purchases and the things that I made actually made it to the people that that are needed to be helped at that time. Is that helpful? Thank you.
To piggyback off that, I didn't mention this in my bio, but I am on the board of 4 nonprofits, and I co-own another one that does a lot of work with displaced people and homeless population right here in Elmira. Some things that are coming in terms of resources for you right now. We are building a web directory of a network of people that provide care, so that they're like vouchsafed folks that are okay to donate to. And I'll give the same advice to you that I give my students at LECOM. Go for a walk around the neighborhood. I can think of 2 places that are walking distance from here. One is the Neighborhood Transformation Center that does a lot of outreach work. They have pantry items, elements like that. Another one is Elmira Community Cycle, which you wouldn't think a community bike shop would be the place, but if you're talking about displaced folks, they can't have transportation, or they don't have limited transportation. So by working and you just have a conversation with somebody and fix a bike, but you learn a lot about that person at that level. And the bike shop is another place that you can walk to from here. It's on 5th Street. And they're always looking for volunteers and additional resources, places to donate hygiene products, food, elements like that too. So there are these networks that are forming and coalescing within Elmira. And I know from intimate knowledge of running with them that we need your help. So that is my pitch to you here in terms of reaching some of these displaced or affected populations.
Very cool, thank you. Yeah, a lot of that's specific to Elmira, which is really cool.
Yes.
Very rarely can we talk about that, so thank you
Yeah.
for sharing that. Does anyone have anything? Let's kind of jump to a different topic. If anyone has something new that they want to talk about, but as little guys didn't want to change paths, now's the time to do it. Okay.
How do we stress the importance of climate change to older? We always stress it to the younger generation, but we might as well forget that.
People have a set cognition about things. When you talk to somebody about climate change, yes, you're talking to them about climate change, but you're also disentangling their entire worldview around that. And so, like, when I worked in COVID, I had to convince people to go take COVID tests. That was my full-time job for 6 months. And it was really hard to break down some of those barriers in actually addressing their cognitions. And so when you try to navigate having a conversation about, climate change, it's just one part of an entire person's worldview. So you need to establish some sort of rapport, something that you can kind of agree with, and then start from there. It's almost like you have to plant a seed or find a thread and then pull on that and assimilate things back to that as a parent. But like, is that how cognition works? Is that the right approach?
Yeah, I think it's a good approach. I completely agree with that. I just want to add that, so I think everyone has their own worldview. So how we look at the world. So do we believe there is a justice in the world? Or do I understand how other people understand the world in the right way? So like for older generation, so just one example is that we all know yacht sail. Then so we know older generation, like they like sales. So because they can exchange old items. So like reviews, so they kind of set up the example how to reuse things. So I think that's kind of something we can learn, like younger generation can learn from them. Yeah. So for other things like so the ways to reduce waste. Yeah. So I think that would go through like education or psychoeducation, like information sharing, like between different people. I think that would be beneficial. Yeah. I don't know, just a thought.
Probably a really important point is nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And so being able to have that one-on-one conversation and actually try to understand their worldview is really important, because that's how you can actually, find that slant of, oh, wait, this is the common thread that we can use to communicate in this area. Everybody likes a 70-word snippet or whatever, but humans' minds are way more complicated than that. And so honestly, sitting down and having a discussion about worldview and trying to get to know somebody is critically important. We lost a lot of that in COVID. We falsely believe that a Teams meeting or a Zoom meeting makes up for that. I'm old, I guess. I firmly believe that's wrong. I think sitting down and breaking bread with somebody and talking about something is critically important to humans for millennia. So getting to know them is important, and move that forward. And then a second thing would be lead by example. Be the change you wish to see in the world. So maybe you're not going to be this amazing politician who changes the world or whatever, but you're going to make sure that there is sustainable food available to the students at Elmira College. You're going to partner with these 3 local farms, this local place that has eggs, etc. And there'll be something on campus every Thursday so you can go get fresh food or whatever. And it doesn't drive as far. I'm not schlepping it in from California and pumping greenhouse gases in, but I did it right here. So I'm thinking globally, but I'm acting locally. And that's how you get a grassroots effort to start. You do it a little bit here, and then somebody interacts with your sphere of influence and goes, oh my gosh, I met this amazing student at Elmira. She does these things. I'm going to export this to my little town, or I'm going to take this somewhere else where I go. That's how you spin the flywheel and get it going. And it touches other people. You never know who you may touch in a positive way.
Very cool. That sounds a lot like what social media could be used for. Ashley, if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I'll share that and in the part of meeting in person, because I do think on big topics like this, it is great to be able to connect with people in person. So social media in the aspects of getting the word out, like, hey, we want to have this interest meeting concerning this, and then meeting with those people. But depending on the age of the generation, you may have to do more things like send a newspaper ad, connect, try to get in front of that population. Like what's a way you can get there to be able to talk to them, to invite them to something like that. So going back again to my experience and previous anti-trafficking efforts, I had to do that where I had to bring this huge topic now to an area that, one, was rural, very rural area, and then 2, also had a lot of an older population. So when you're trying to do that, making sure that you are not being in the place of defensiveness, right? Because this topic can, especially when you're very passionate about it, it can really rev you up. But being in a place of like, this is what the issue is, this is how I see this can play out, and this is how we can help and giving someone the solution of like what they can do next that is actual possible. Like they might not be able to go to Washington, the next day and protest about whatever, but could they talk about their their shopping issues? Could you talk to them about, hey, you could actually go to this site instead of this site, and that will actually have an effect on climate change. So all the way around, being able to get to the place of knowing where they're at, bring them in and showing them the importance of the issue, and then what you want to do also to change it in a way that seems manageable to them. Because if they get overwhelmed, that's another thing. That's where you lose people, especially those within the older generation. And I also want to shout out, I am also a busy mom and my 3 kids are here. So thank you for allowing them to be here and that they're doing the best they can right now. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, you're great.
Thank you.
I don't want to ask this side of the room. Oh, perfect. Yeah.
Would it be okay if I added one more thought to those discussions? I'm thinking about discussions with older people, and some of the older age generation might be thinking about might also be your parents, extended mobility or employees around. And I think that sometimes large messages are helpful, but and we think that in that way we're organizing too, right? But something a lot of the panels are talking about is individual relationships. The folks you're talking to might not know a lot about. I mean, some of them, there are a lot of really progressive older folks. There's a lot of energy of some people networks, but even if they already don't feel this with priority, they may have a really close relationship, let's say with nature, right? Or with, like, you may have people in your community who are middle-aged or older who have spent their whole life fishing or hunting or gardening, like things that where the conversation, you're not asking how much do you know about climate change or what can I tell you that you might be able to change in your life, but rather asking questions or open-ended, like, so where's the coolest place you've been fishing in that life? Can you tell me about a day when you're really like on the water, and then once we establish that, then you have questions about wetlands, or the fish that's not there anymore, But if you can find something that's actually
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for the panel? We got about 10 minutes left. You guys almost made it. We're almost done. So we're gonna try and get 2 more questions in. If anybody has one. Ashley Fred, you want to ask a question?
Sure. So I'm looking at going to the medical field. I don't know, we kind of touched on a few things, but if you have any additional thoughts that go along with that, maybe things seem changing throughout the couple of years if you've been in healthcare for a little while.
That's it. There's going to be no shortage of need for healthcare involved individuals, regardless of what role you take. So, whether you are a physician, a nurse, a tech, a psychiatrist, a psychologist, what are you interested in? What is passionate and drives you? But there's probably something you can find.
I'm looking into going into oncology actually. So I'm open to a lot of possibilities.
Well, I think we've established that, oncology is going to be alive and thriving. We have the baby boomer generation that is getting to the age where cancer is a more prevalent risk for them. It's an exciting field also from the perspective of, and this gets back to your question earlier, will we see more cancer? With an unpolished view, yes, we're going to see more cancer because we continue to push the testing earlier and earlier and earlier, right? So it used to be 50 years old for a colonoscopy. Now it's 40 or 45 is the new recommendation because we're looking for the needle in the haystack to catch the disease earlier to have more survivors. So let's say you don't take a bedside role, but you become a researcher looking at the new way to find this. I'm kind of hopeful that in the next 10 or 15 years, I'll go to the bathroom in the morning and like there'll be some AI running in the background that says, "Ooh, John, you have like 2 weird epithelial cells today. You probably ought to go follow up with your primary care doctor." Okay. Oh, John, we just checked, when you brushed your teeth and there's like some abnormality to your plaque that suggests you might have an early infection in one of your teeth. Maybe you should go see a dentist or, swizzle with some extra Listerine or whatever. That early detection, I think, is possible. Bearing in mind, I want to make sure that it's not just for a select subset of the population, right? We need to make sure that we all have access to that. So you see some of these really cool presentations that happen, and it's like, but it shouldn't be limited to 0.01% of the population that can drop $2 million on the early cancer detector in your toilet. How about we make that so that it exists everywhere? Infrastructure for COVID surveillance, right? They're checking your wastewater now. Somebody is looking at your poop and seeing if you have COVID. But can that be done on an individual level rather than writ large in a community? That's pretty exciting. It's pretty cool. What happens if we could play with your telomeres and make you, stay physiologically at 20, for 20 or 30 years? That's kind of cool.
Could I understand the situations like, so the medical system is trying to detect the problem earlier and fix the problem earlier so that we were not worried. So then we will not have anxiety. Is that the understanding?
There's an interesting dichotomy here. I love the assembly of this panel because you've got the science nerd side and you've got the applied medical side. I tell this to my med students all the time. I'm like, you guys want to be real doctors. Like, I don't. I see blood in the EM, I'm passing out. You can still study oncology. You can still find a role. And like, I started as an environmental scientist, and all of you are very early in your careers, like still in school. There's a lot of incipient evolutions that are going to happen just naturally. You'll be doing something in 15 years that you'll never in a million years imagine doing. I thought I'd be in a lab for the rest of time. And now I'm here and I'm teaching and I do this now. I'm like, that makes no sense. So how does this relate to environmental science? Just having that little nugget of, hey, I care about the climate, which obviously you do because you're here. I care about the climate. How does that evolve over time? That evolution from climate interests led me from climate to oncology to COVID to teaching biochemistry at a med school. It's a natural progression. And there's 2 sides. If you are interested in going into like medicine broadly, you can be a lab dork like me, which there's nothing wrong with us. We have fun. We crunch our numbers. I spend my time in a lab or in a computer. Now I talk to people, but beforehand it was that versus actual hands-on healing people directly person to person. So you kind of do get here 2 different perspectives. You get the person to person and you get the population prevention side of things. There's a role for both within oncology, within environmental science, within whatever interests you. And that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. So we have about 5 minutes left. So I'm actually just gonna ask you guys to kind of give a conclusion, like a 1-minute conclusion, to kind of what you guys thought, maybe something you want to make sure they remember as they leave. We're actually gonna start on the far side this time, work our way towards me.
I guess the most important thing you can do is engage. Don't stand on the sidelines. We desperately need your help. Sure, I need your help on the healthcare side. We need your help in any of these fields, but you are the future. You've got the longest view ahead of you. And so we need you to engage, do something locally, do something globally, but just get involved, find a way. There is, we are all connected by a common human bond of sympathy. Pull that out of. Anyway, but we're all humans, and while people have dichotomous views on things, and you may have noticed that there are, there's clearly some angst in our world. We're all humans. We're all here together, and actually, if we put our minds to this, we can actually fix this. It's not too far gone. I know I've like painted some scary things about healthcare, but we, can fix that. Hop into the arena, and fight.
So since we're humans, so we're mindful of environmental change. So I would like to use environmental change instead of climate change. So because environmental change can include a lot of things, unexpected situation. So that's why, so when the internal, so the external situation happened, then so there could be new disease, new situation happen. So we are mindful of that. So we're not worried. So because we're expecting what's gonna happen. So what we need to do is just trying to figure out what that is, then, so develop the solutions. Yeah.
So I'm just gonna say to keep an open mind and eclectic view of how you can be part of the solution, because there's multiple ways, right? And to not be afraid to use your own creativity, your own network to create solutions that maybe haven't been thought of or presented in a way that you've seen before, but that can be effective. So I would just encourage that as you move forward, that you're making more of informed decisions, right? So you're educating yourself so you know what best track you want to take, what decision you want to make to be part of the solution in this huge issue, but not, like you said, not standing on the side, but being able to play a part, but realizing it doesn't have to look like how it's always looked like. There could be a unique way that you end up being part of the solution in the situation.
Okay, climate change is still a problem. I can't snap my fingers and fix it. Nobody can, right? But it's not up to you to fix all of climate change. It's up to you to find that one little morsel that interests you, that you feel like you can help with, whether that's in the guise of a career, a class that you take here, work that you do here, or community work, or all of the above. There are resources here for you. So to echo some of the previous thoughts, get involved. You don't have to fix everything all at once. None of us can snap our fingers and immediately fix everything. But that doesn't mean that there's not something you can do. And, just a general plea, I'll give my email out again. Please come talk to me about getting involved in the Elmira community. It can be about anything. We do food supplies for displaced people. We do transportation. We do health education resources. We do everything, either with LECOM or with other partners, and it's happening literally a block from here. You don't have to go far. So we'll be in touch, I hope. Feel free to reach out, and that's my last note. But thank you all.
Awesome. Thank you all. Thank you guys. Thanks everybody for coming. I'll actually have you write your email on the board if you want.
Cool.
That'll work.
Oh, yes.
Excellent. So if you want to write your email there, you can reach out to him if you maybe have more questions or want to get engaged. He's really good with the Elmira area. How long have you been here? I've lived here my whole life. Lived here his whole life. Thank you guys online for tuning in. And that's about everything. Are you guys planning on staying in or I don't really know.
I'll have a table at the other building if anyone has any questions. Yeah.
My email address. I will see you in class. Thank you.
Yeah.